we stand together, we'll never fall. We can make a difference.
And I am your host, and I would like to welcome you to this episode. Tonight is Saturday, March 28th. It's March 18th, 2023. And this is episode number 499 of a show where we talk about personal growth and development through finding in balance in life. And it is my personal belief that we cannot fully grow or develop our full potential as human beings unless we do exactly that. And when I mean exactly that, I'm talking about finding balance in several different areas of our life. Now, for anybody out there who is watching or may be watching or actually is listening out there in podcast land, I sound a little bit discombobulated right now because I am getting a little bit of a late start. And the reason I am getting a little bit of a late start in tonight's episode is because the book study and fellowship group that I attend on Saturday nights ran a little bit long. I gave someone a ride home, and the ride home turned into a lengthy discussion, but I regret nothing. I think when we have an opportunity to connect with someone on a deeper level, I think it's important to capitalize on any and all opportunities that we have in life to connect with people in that way, because as human beings, that is an important thing to do. And that is also how we find the balance that we seek. So when we're talking about balance in life, with regard to the show, we talk about compartmentalizing the show and taking an in-depth look at each of those areas in life. And that includes social relationships, the social part of our life. And that is just one of many areas that we look at. We talk about financial, physical, personal development, family, spiritual, social, and career. Now, last week's episode was a career topic. The prior week, we talked about social and specifically about, boomers and zoomers and the generational communication differences between generations. The week before that was a spiritual topic. And next week's episode is going to be a physical episode where we are going to talk about cannabis. That's right. So stay tuned for next week's show as we do a deep dive on cannabis, but more on that later. So now, as I mentioned in last week's show, for those of you who did not watch it or did not listen to the podcast, the topic of today's show was going to involve fear, and specifically the fear of financial insecurity. The fear of financial insecurity in life, or the fear of not having financial security. And we had a lot of audience feedback on this topic this week. And for that, I am very grateful. Now, most of the feedback from tonight's episode comes from the Telegram group, which you are cordially invited to join. You can find us online at t.me/allaroundgrowth. You don't need the app on your phone. You don't need anything to participate in the group. Just go to your internet browser, type in t.me/allaroundgrowth, install it on your desktop or your laptop, whatever, and join us there. Moving forward, I've said this before, I will say it again, and hopefully execute on some of the things that I say. I am going to try to make a concerted effort to share the show topics in advance on all social media. And all of the social media is linked to in the description below. So if you want to follow the group or follow the show on whatever particular social media of choice that you use, be it Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, it's all linked below. So check out the description in the show notes and give us a like and a follow. And if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel at youtube.com/@allaroundgrowth, then I would definitely encourage you to like the episode, share the episode, hit the notification bell. Let's engage the algorithm a little bit and hopefully spread the good word that I like to think is being shared, because the good word is simply not what I have to say, but a lot of the show comes from the audience. And like I said, you guys have been increasingly engaged with the show. And for that, I am supremely grateful, because not only does it provide a lot of food for thought, but in my humble opinion, it subsequently provides a better show for the audience, for everybody out there who is not actively engaging in the Telegram group, not actively engaging in social media, people who are listening and just taking it in for whatever it's worth. So, with regard to fear of financial insecurity, when this topic was first presented to the Telegram group just a few days ago on Thursday, March 16th, there were a flurry of comments, and Sean took the lead on this dialogue, and he shared, quote, "From our church home group, I get the impression some people who are not skilled with personal finances justify it using a spiritual context. For example, I don't need money. God will provide." And he writes, "I don't mean to debate the religious merits of this, but he found that himself feeling that this was an excuse. And after that interaction, he thought that money can be used both defensively, like to provide food, shelter, etc., and potentially offensively too, in terms of investments or other ways to make money." He finally concludes by saying that he thinks there are a lot of wrong or unhealthy attitudes about money. And he also followed up quickly by saying, "I realize that sounds rather snotty without more context," and that, he was going to try and follow up later. Now, I don't think it sounded rather snotty without more context. I think this is the nature of text and the nature of online interaction. It's hard to convey the feelings that and what it is that we're talking about without actual human interaction. And like I said, it was human interaction that was taking place prior to this episode today, which is why I ran a little bit late, because human interaction is something that is lacking, that we're lacking a lot of in this world now. And I think if we had more human interaction, we would have less problems, and we would not interpret all of the things that we see, hear, read as snotty. We would have the context that we lack. And for those of you guys out there listening to this in the future in the podcast, this is in large part why I took advantage of the opportunity to start streaming the show in the manner that I am, because I think doing this provides a lot of context for those who might not otherwise have it, because you can see me, you can see my body language, you can see my facial expressions. There's a little bit more connectivity here with you than there is when I'm just talking into a microphone and recording a podcast. Now, after Sean's comment, Wayne immediately chimed in and wrote, no, not at all. People tend to falsely think that the Bible tells them to strive to be poor and you will be rewarded at Judgment Day, often without context, or often without reference or in context. There are a lot of references stating the opposite. Not once does it say being poor or wealthy in itself is ungodly. He continues to say people also sometimes have this false belief that they can do basically nothing and God will ensure all needs are met without ever stopping to think about how those needs would be met. When an opportunity is provided, these two false beliefs work together to keep that person thinking they should be living a life they don't want. And he also followed up by stating that he intentionally oversimplified that thought for brevity. Now, that is an interesting response to Sean's comment about people not being skilled with personal finances, justifying it in a spiritual context. For example, I don't need money, God will provide. And, Wayne writing that, or kind of agreeing in a way, people falsely believing that the Bible encourages us to strive to be poor, in that we're going to receive some kind of reward for this at Judgment Day. And I think, quite frankly, there's a lot of misinterpretation of the Bible. I think there's a lot of people that quote scripture and do so in order to make a point about something, whether that point is about finance, whether that point is about physical health and well-being, or personal development, or our families, or our own spirituality or lack thereof, or how we interact with each other socially, or what we do in terms of work that generates the income that we use, or maybe the income that we don't. There's simply a lot of misinterpretation of scripture, and I find myself agreeing with both Sean and Wayne here that people have this false belief and thinking that we don't really have to do anything and God will simply take care of everything. And that, in my humble opinion, is simply not true. There's this crazy thing for those people who are just remotely aware of the Bible and what people think about God. And there's this thing called free will, and that allows us the opportunity to do or not do certain things. And that free will that we all have, for lack of a better term, facilitates this mental environment that allows us to, like Wayne said, keep the person thinking that they should be living a life that they don't want. All right. So, shortly thereafter, Brian Norton from Food Forest Farms, who just so happens to be one of the sponsors of today's show, please check Brian out at foodforestfarms.com, and you can learn more about everything that's going on there. The hip camp that he's got, the Airbnb, the air roasted coffee. He writes, how about not be fearful of the untethering? Something, some things come easy with wage slavery, but there hasn't been anything he has not been able to do that he really wanted to do as a GDI, or gosh darn independent. And he writes false security, the concept of enough. And Brian, while I haven't met Brian personally, from what I know about him, he is a hustler. He works hard. He has been self-sufficient, his own man, his own boss for quite some time. He's engaged in a lot of different things, and he is engaged in the very things that he's engaged in because he is not fearful of the untethering that he mentioned here. And in my opinion, what he's talking about is relinquishing one's dependency on an employer to provide for you financially, and in order to do that yourself, to provide for yourself financially, to support yourself in all ways that come along with doing so. And the false security that comes along with working for someone under terms of the employ that you do is exactly that. It is false security, because what happens when we are not these GDIs, or these gosh darn independents, is we always wonder about the things that we don't have, right? And it is only when we untether that we finally experience those things that we've always wondered about. So think about that. All right. Pause this, rewind it, think about that again. Wayne chimed in again almost immediately after Brian's comment and wrote that he had a realization about the concept of enough the other day, and he came to the conclusion that it is a lie in every way that you think about it. There is no such thing. What he's saying is, when Brian wrote the concept of enough, there is no such thing as enough. Enough of what? Enough money so that you can buy the house, the car, the boat, the education for your children, the clothing that you need. I mean, what is enough? Okay. What is it going to take for you to be satisfied on the inside, to feel whole as a human being, to achieve the balance that we seek, right? That's what this show is about. It's about finding that balance. It's about determining what enough is. We can't find that simply through seeking more dollars to acquire more things. We may have enough in the material world, but what is the material world anyways? Is it an illusion? Is this even real? I know we're going to get a little bit far out there if I continue talking like that, so I'll refrain and I'll continue on with the dialogue that continued between and with Brian and Wayne. Brian chimed in and said, yeah, it's one thing to think about. It's another to experience. And then he wrote about the Buddha, and he wrote that the Buddha left a family and the palace. He had it all. It wasn't enough. The painful quest was his reward. It was the journey that was the reward. It was not the destination. You follow me? Wayne continued up with that and said, indeed, I came to the realization that I'll never have enough money. I'll never have enough old cars to play with. I'll never have enough good food to eat. But I'll also never have enough happy memories with my wife and kids. Never have enough time. Never see enough amazing things the world has to offer. Never have enough love to give or receive. From any angle, enough doesn't exist. And guys, that is why I had no hesitation in starting the show late, because this can wait. And maybe a few listeners or a few people watching the live stream saw that it didn't start on time and said, this didn't fit my schedule. I'm going to turn it off. And that's okay, because this show isn't for everyone. This show encourages us to take a look at what that means. What is enough? I'm going to read Wayne's comment again. Wayne came to the realization that he's never going to have enough money. He's never going to have enough old cars to play with. He's never going to have enough good food to eat. He also realized that he's never going to have enough happy memories with his wife and kids, never have enough time, never see enough amazing things that the world has to offer. never have enough love to give or receive. From any angle, enough doesn't exist. But when we have these opportunities to give love, then we need to take those opportunities. We have to give to receive. We have to be able to give amazing things in order to receive amazing things. We have to be open and receptive in life to be able to provide in order to receive. We have to take time to create those amazing memories with our wife, with our kids, with our parents, with our brothers, with our sisters, with our community. We have to take time to give in order to experience anything remotely close to enough. Okay? And with all that said, we're going to talk about what enough is, specifically regarding money and financial security in today's episode. And since fear of financial insecurity is the topic of today's show, I don't think it is any coincidence that I read the following on Monday morning. All right, it was last Saturday evening around this same time when I recorded the last episode. And that episode was titled that episode was titled something that is escaping my mind right now. It was the winter market wrap up and the spring look ahead. My goodness. But it was during that episode when I realized that we were going to talk about fear today. So Sunday came, Sunday went, and on Monday morning, I read from the book of Proverbs, chapter 8, verses 1 through 21. And I'm going to go ahead and share that with you now. Again, this comes from Proverbs chapter 8, verses 1 through 21. And we read as follows. Does not wisdom cry out, and understanding lift up her voice? She takes her stand on top of the high hill, beside the way where the paths meet. She cries out by the gates, at the entry of the city, at the entrance of the doors. To you, O men, I call, and my voice is to the sons of men. O you simple ones, understand prudence, and you fools, be of an understanding heart. Listen, for I will speak of excellent things, and from the opening of my lips will come right things. For my mouth will speak truth. Wickedness is an abomination to my lips. All the words of my mouth are with righteousness. Nothing crooked or perverse is in them. They are all plain to him who understands, and right to those who find knowledge. Receive my instruction, and not silver, and knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is better than rubies, and all the things one may desire cannot be compared with her. I, wisdom, dwell with prudence, and find out knowledge and discretion. The fear of the Lord is to hate evil. Pride and arrogance and the evil way and the perverse mouth I hate. Counsel is mine, and sound wisdom. I am understanding. I have strength. By me kings reign, and rulers decree justice. By me princes rule, and nobles, all the judges of the earth. And those who love me, and those who seek me diligently will find me. Riches and honor are mine, enduring riches and righteousness. My fruit is better than gold, yes, than fine gold, and my revenue than choice silver. I traverse the way of righteousness in the midst of the paths of justice, that I may cause those who love me to inherit wealth, that I may fill their treasures. Now, to provide a little bit of context, I've been reading the scripture each morning for a little over a month now, since being gifted a Bible from Father John, who is the priest of a church that I've been attending recently, St. George. And I've linked to St. George down in the show description below. If you're curious about that, you can click on that link, learn more about the church. I recently learned that the website, along with the church itself, is undergoing some reconstruction. There's some new paintings, some new icons, not paintings. There's some new icons being written on the walls of the church. Yes, I said written, not painted. We can talk about that later. And you can learn a little bit more about the church that I'm attending by clicking that link in the description below, St. George. Now, how does this relate to money? We'll see in just a second. But this spiritual path that I've been on, which I referenced a couple episodes ago in an episode called Finding My Religion, is one that has lasted over 3 decades. And while this particular episode is not specifically a spiritual episode, the spiritual component of my life factors heavily into today's show topic. Now, I used to do this live stream on Sundays. I changed it to Saturday night because on Sundays, I'm trying to make a concerted effort to rest, to not do work, and prepare for the week ahead so I can be more efficient at doing the work I do. So on Sundays, while I think about the podcast, I no longer put a whole lot of work into it. I focus my Sundays on rest, spending time with my family, both my blood family, my church family, and the family that I am cultivating within my community, spending time with new people, new places, doing new things. So as I woke up last Monday morning, the 13th of March in 2023, and I just went through engaging in my morning routine, which now includes reading the scriptures daily, I read this particular passage, and I couldn't help but begin thinking about the upcoming show on fear with regard to the financial aspect of our lives, which is the fear of financial insecurity, the topic of today's show. Now, within that passage, we read the excellence of wisdom. And the partial passage of it that I read from the lectionary, there were several lines that stood out to me. And for those of you who are interested in the lectionary and what it is that I'm reading, I will go ahead and drop that in the comments so that you can actually see and read a little bit and follow along with what I'm talking about. But this was from Monday the 13th, the first Monday of the third week of Great Lent, right? And the lines that stood out to me that made me think of ways to reframe my perspective on fear regarding financial security were specifically from verses 9 to 11. And again, for those who are tuning in, coming in late, this is from Proverbs chapter 8, verses 9 to 11. They are all plain to him who understands, and right to those who find knowledge. Receive my instruction, and not silver, and knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is better than rubies, and all the things one may desire cannot be compared to her. Also, in verses 17 through 21, in the same chapter, chapter 8 of Proverbs, we read, I love those who love me, and those who seek me diligently will find me. Riches and honor are with me, enduring riches and righteousness. My fruit is better than gold, yes, than fine gold, and my revenue than choice silver. I traverse the way of righteousness in the midst of the paths of justice, that I may cause those who love me to inherit wealth, that I may fill their treasuries. All right. A lot of us, when we read scripture, we don't understand some of the esoteric meaning that comes along with this. So, what's my interpretation of this? I'll do my best to explain. My understanding of this is that so long as I seek the instruction of God, I will find knowledge. Knowledge leads to wisdom, and wisdom cannot be compared to anything of this world, right? Wisdom cannot be compared to rubies. It's better than rubies. Wisdom cannot be compared to anything that we may desire. And in the context of today's show, wisdom cannot be compared to financial gain. For we understand that God loves those who so love God. And for those who seek diligently, we will find him. We read that riches and honor are with God. Not just riches are with God, but enduring riches and righteousness. We read that God's fruit is better than gold, and that his revenue is better than choice silver. And we've got a lot of people out there that are into metals, into crypto, into investments, into real estate, into all kinds of things. But ultimately, at the close of Monday's scripture, we read that God may cause those who love him to inherit wealth, that he may fill our treasuries. But we've got to understand what wealth means. It's not simply in terms of the money. What does wealth mean to you? I think when we can define that, we've got something that aligns a little bit more with wisdom. All right, so to summarize, in my infinite wisdom, I've deduced that in order to seek true wisdom, I must shift my focus on God. And that in this seeking of wisdom, I found Christ. Not that I ever lost sight of Christ, but I intellectualized Christ to the point of misunderstanding. And this misunderstanding led me off the path as I began chasing spirituality in all manner of ways, right? And that was misguided. I've been thinking and contemplating this particular passage from Proverbs chapter 8 all week long. And finally, my thoughts culminated in a meeting just yesterday to discuss a job that was offered to me. This meeting was proposed earlier in the week on Monday, as a matter of fact, shortly after I read this scripture. Now, I met the owner of a company for lunch yesterday to discuss the details of this particular job. Now, the reality is that I, in a sense, had made up my mind regarding the job prior to going into the meeting. However, having limited information about the nature of the job, what the expectations actually were, I decided that it would be a good idea to meet him anyways to learn more about what the job and the scope of work actually entailed, right? Because who knows? I knew initially that he was seeking part-time work, something that could lead into full-time work, that he would hope would lead into full-time work. And I actually entertained the idea when we first talked about this a while back, because as a self-employed man, I have a fair amount of freedom regarding what I do and what I can take on, and more specifically, how I can take it on. However, as we discussed in last week's episode, talking about the winter market wrap up and what's coming up for the 2023 season, I've made commitments to my largest customer, which is York Meadow Farm, my family's business, for over 2/3 of the 2023 calendar year. York Meadow Farm is also a sponsor of today's show. If you want to check out what we do here, I would definitely encourage you to do that. YorkMeadowFarm.com. Links to all of the show sponsors, York Meadow Farm, Food Forest Farms, all of that is in the description below, along with a lot of what we're talking about today. And so please give those links. Please check out those links, along with liking, sharing, subscribing to the show, hitting that notification bell, doing all the things that we do when we listen to podcasts and watch them on YouTube and social media. But back to this conversation yesterday, I learned what the job entailed. I learned that I had the potential to earn 5 times more than my current income in a very fast amount of time. But the reality is, I'm not in this for the money. I don't work for the money anymore. I work for the love. Right? And growing up, my father really only gave me one simple piece of financial and career advice. But he did this consistently. When I was challenged with what I wanted to do in life, he always told me, do what you love, do it well, and the money will come. Do what you love, do it well, and the money will come. Now, as I was putting this show together and assembling some notes for this episode right now, I got to thinking, was that an original quote from my father? Or was that something he gleaned from somewhere else? And I just wasn't sure. I just knew it as something that's what I learned. That's what my dad told me consistently. I mean, like I said, every time I was challenged with what I wanted to do in life, and this was from my teenage years all throughout my 20s, because it's been a journey. I've done a few different things over the years. I've lived in many places and consistently been looking for more, seeking more. But he always came back with one simple piece of advice: do what you love, do it well, and the money will come. I didn't find anything on the internet that stated anybody said exactly that. However, I did find a couple different quotes that were similar. And one was a quote by a woman named Marcia Sinitar, who is quoted as saying, "Do what you love and the money will follow." And then the other was a quote by Confucius, who is quoted as saying, "Choose a job you love and you'll never work a day in your life." Now, being unaware of who Marcia Sinitar was, I decided to do some digging on this, and I was surprised about what I learned. All right. What we read right here is that true learning is spiritual wholeness through the contemplative way. And we read, "In thy light, we shall see light," from Psalm 36, verse 9. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. And then we see, "Welcome to our site." And we've got a little button here that we can click for a welcome message from Marcia Sinitar. So I'm going to turn up my volume. I'm going to play this for you now and hope that this comes out all right in the audio. So let's take a listen and see what Marcia has to say as we explore her website a little bit. And that looks like it's not going to work. So I've got to adjust my sound settings real quick here. And make sure that I can actually do what I'm trying to do and hope that this works out. Make sure that I can actually do. Okay, so now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and stop talking, press play again, and stand by for what Marcia has to say. I'm going to go ahead and stop talking. Oof. And stand by for what Marcia has to say. I'm going to go ahead. Oof. Stand by for. All right. So to summarize, her writing is encouraging the reader to understand that our life and work can consist in a conversion of manners, as she puts it. And what this means, a conversion of manners, as she said, is us changing our whole life to serve the highest and best in us, which she believes is God. Basically, not basically, but trying to determine what not her purpose is in this life, but what God's purpose is for her in this life. And she encourages what she refers to as true learning. And that is to become the self that we were created to be by God. Now, real quick, I think what's interesting about this particular woman, Marcia Sinitar, is that she began her professional life as a primary teacher, moving through the ranks of public education as an English teacher, and then a kindergarten through fifth grade principal, soon a consultant for both local and state projects, designing curriculum for individualized institution and mentally gifted minors. Okay. And in 1980, she left the public sector to start Sinitar and Associates Incorporated, customizing leadership programs for senior management of multinational Fortune 500 corporations. Concurrently with her private sector work, she began writing and is the author of numerous business articles, over 20 books, including children's books, and a growing number of professional monographs and recordings. Now, in 2000, she redesigned her life again towards a simpler, more contemplative schedule and began a small R&D arm, research and development arm and archive related to her lifelong love with what she calls the true learning, or actualizing the spiritual wholeness that we are created to be. Now, I think that this is very interesting, and I would encourage you to check out the link below on Marcia Sinitar if you are anything remotely interested in what she has to say. But the long and short of it is, I'm not familiar with this woman. I'm not familiar with any of the work that she's done, but I am on board with this idea of true learning. I am on board with the idea of actualizing the spiritual wholeness that God has in mind for us. So, how do we do this? Right? Well, I have some opinions about that because this is something I've been trying to do. It requires work. And for me, it's involved a lot of soul searching and goal setting over the years. And if you're not sure how to set goals, or if you've failed with the execution of the goals that you've set in the past, I would like to encourage you to check out a link in the show notes in the description below on the goal setting workbook that I've linked to. Now, some of you are going to be familiar with this, some of you are not. But for those of you who are not, the goal setting workbook is a free download that comes from Dan Miller. And it's about 15, 20 pages long. And you will see in that workbook how the goals are broken down. They're broken down in these 7 components that I talk about routinely: financial, physical, personal development, family, spiritual, social, and career. It is from that goal setting workbook where I basically took the idea that he outlined there with regard to goals. And I structured this whole show around the concept of finding balance in those 7 areas of life. And it was in the process and over the course of this entire show over the past 2.5 years almost now that I've really begun to myself actualize what all around growth means to me. It's required work. And I've followed this goal setting workbook for 3 years now. And it's really helped me gain some insight into who I am, what I want, and how I can get there and how I can make it happen. All right. So if you're interested in this idea of true learning, setting goals, achieving them, then check out this goal setting workbook. It's absolutely free. I would encourage you to download it and check it out and, give it a shot and gain a little bit more insight into what this show is all about, why I do the things that I do, why the show is structured the way that it is. And, since the topic of today's show is fear of financial insecurity, speaking of goals, I think it's worth noting that I'd like to give a little shout out to Joe Maines from A Fresh New Focus. And he is a financial coach that I've worked with in the past. And he specifically helped me achieve the financial goals that helped me accelerate my own financial journey to help me get to where I am today. So if you are looking for a solid financial coach, then I can't recommend him highly enough. I think very highly of Joe. I think very highly of the work that he does. I think very highly of the way he approaches his role as a coach. He's not just going to, give you, let me rephrase that. He's going to give you encouragement and coach you, but when the time is appropriate, he will also provide you with a little bit of tough love and point out where you are failing with regard to the goals that you've set. He helps keep you accountable. So I've linked to his information in the description below too, and I will do so in the show notes because, again, since this show is of the financial sphere, if you're looking for someone to help you work through your own financial goals, then please reach out to Joe Maines because I'm confident he can help you because he helped me. So back to this quote of do what you love, do it well, and the money will come. We learned a little bit about Marcia Sinitar, and many of us are also familiar with Confucius, who is quoted as saying, choose a job you love and you'll never work a day in your life. But for those of you who aren't necessarily all that familiar with Confucius, Confucius was a Chinese philosopher and politician of the spring and autumn period who is traditionally considered the paragon of Chinese sages. Confucius's teachings and philosophy underpin East Asian culture and society, remaining influential across China and East Asia to this day. That is a brief synopsis from Wikipedia. You can learn more about Confucius by clicking the link in the show notes and just going down some internet wormholes if you like, but I figured that was worth pointing out as well. So, like I said, I've linked to both Marcia Sinitar and Confucius in the show notes, and I would encourage you to read more on both. Now, these quotes from both of them are about doing what we love, money, and work. And both of them have good quotes, but they are not my father's quote. Now, I am not my father, but the quote that he shared with me, do what you love, do it well, and the money will come, is a quote that, and wisdom and guidance and counsel from my father that I've followed over the years to the best of my abilities. And I say that with some hesitation and some reluctance because do what you love, do it well, and the money will come. I like to say that that's guidance and counsel that I followed to the best of my abilities. But the reality is I didn't, because my ability to understand love, my ability to express love, it's in large part, it's been suppressed, generally speaking. And subsequently, the result of that was my abilities to find true work that I loved, do that work well, and experience real financial gain. Yes, I've had jobs where I had a company vehicle, I had company stock, I had some good things, but I've also been through a bankruptcy and then proceeded to get in tens of thousands of dollars in debt, which I then paid off with the help of Joe Maines. So why did all this happen? Like, why did I have the challenges that I did? Why did I suppress all of this over the years? And how? I think a lot of it is due to the fact that a lot of my emotions, a lot of my growth and development emotionally, mentally, spiritually was suppressed by the use and oftentimes abuse of alcohol and drugs, both of which I've decided to eliminate from my life completely. And yes, this absolutely includes cannabis, which, as a matter of fact, has been recommended to me as a treatment for the chronic neurological condition that I've been dealing with since the age of 13. And with that said, this is a great segue into the conclusion of today's show. But before we actually begin to wrap up the show today, I want to reiterate a couple of things. Do what you love and do it well, and the money will come. How do you find out what you love? Set goals. You work towards them. You do the work and you do it consistently. A great way to set goals is by working through the goal setting guide, a workbook that's available for free in the description below. It's simple, but not easy. It requires work. It requires consistent work. There is the ability for all of us to find and create work that we love. We do this by bringing together all of these aspects in our life: financial, physical, personal development, family, spiritual, social, career, all the topics that we talk about on this show. They come directly from that workbook by Dan Miller, author of the book 48 Days to the Work and Life You Love. The 20th edition, updated edition, was recently released last year, if I'm not mistaken. And that is a book that I highly recommend. Those two things, specifically this goal setting workbook, will help you better understand what it is that you love because, quite frankly, my understanding of all of this is that we can't be happy in our careers. We can't be happy doing work that allows us to achieve financial security unless we've achieved some level of balance, growth, and development in these other 6 aspects of life, right? So how do we do that? We set goals, we set metrics, we execute, we do the work, and we do it consistently. Doing all of that is something that I've not done for the bulk of my entire life. And like I said, the reason why is because of consistent use and largely abuse of alcohol and drugs. And that includes cannabis, which, as someone with a chronic neurological condition of epilepsy, is maybe controversial for some people, because there are a lot of people that promote that encourage it, that feel it is not harmful. But I think anything in excess can be, and that is something that I'll talk a little bit more about in depth in next week's show. So I hope that you enjoyed today's show on fear of financial insecurity. I hope that provided a little bit of insight into what you can do about that, how you can address financial insecurity, right? Set goals, work with a financial coach. There's links to do both of those things in the description below. Please check those out. Those 2 things will help you overcome the fear of financial insecurity. And ultimately, I look forward to catching you on next week's episode, where we're going to talk shop on cannabis. We're going to talk about its efficacy with regard to the treatment of epilepsy. And ultimately, I'm going to share with you why I stopped using it completely. So if you have any questions or comments on today's show, feel free to drop them in the comments below. And be sure to check out All Around Growth on social media this week. Like I said, I'm going to begin with audience feedback before diving into the topic of the show, much like I did today. I very much enjoyed that. I enjoy the audience participation. I enjoy the engagement from the audience. It's very rewarding. And I hope that you enjoy it as well. Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate you tuning in today. I appreciate your support throughout all of the time and months that I've been doing this show. I appreciate the letter that you sent me. I appreciate you, Kathy. I appreciate your friendship. I'm very grateful that I've gotten to know you. I'm very grateful that I've gotten to know everyone in the audience. I don't know very many of you personally, but I like to think of all of you as not just acquaintances, but I like to think of you as friends. If it wasn't for you guys in the way that you are a part of my life, I wouldn't be living my life the way that I do. And so again, I'm very grateful for all of you. I really appreciate you tuning in. I appreciate you watching. I appreciate you participating. And again, stay tuned on social media. Links to everything in the social media is in the description of the video below. And I hope that you have a great day tomorrow. I hope that you have a great week ahead. And I look forward to seeing you next Saturday night.
that I believe in friendship and love. And truth is always the best way to the world that may seem odd. I'm an odd fellow. I'm an odd fellow. Whoa, whoa. I'm an odd fellow. If we stand together, we'll never fall. We can make a difference and answer the call. You know the times are wasting every day, and we can help somebody along the way. People may think that it's odd that I believe in friendship and love. Truth is always the best way to the world that may seem odd. I'm an odd fellow. You're an odd